starts.
By asking you this, who's the best high school football player you've ever covered?
Wow, that's a good question. Let me see. I could say, let me see, I covered Robert Strait when he was at Cuero. He was phenomenal running back. Let's see who else I've seen that was real. Dalton Brooks is now at Texas A&M's another one.
Yeah, he's terrific.
Yeah, he was something exceptional in high school. Of course, I covered Bay City, so I saw a lot of good athletes out there. Yeah, just I don't know if I could say one guy was the best. It's hard to say.
All right, well, we can move to modern day. I saw on your Twitter profile you're a UCLA and SMU graduate. So does that mean how do you feel about the Mustangs?
I feel like I'm glad they got in. You know, I was a little worried there after they lost to Clemson. But I feel like, you know, that the fact that they came back like that and almost won, I think that's what got them in there.
Well, your experience too. What's your relationship like with that program? Were you in school around like the Craig James, Eric Dickerson, Ron Meyer, those guys?
Actually, I was before that, but I did cover the Cotton Bowl where they beat Pitt, and that when Dickerson and James were there, and it was pretty bizarre because when we went after the game to go to the locker room to do interviews, they kept us out of there for a while. And the word is the boosters were in there taking care of things.
Were you surprised as someone who had been there just a handful of years before, and now you're covering this team that is the best in college football? Sort of a rags to riches story. No pun intended there, but the reality.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when I was there, they were decent, but you know, never really great. And yeah, when they started getting athletes like they did, it was pretty obvious something was going on. But they weren't the only ones doing it. So, in fact, I think it's pretty well known that the Trans Am that Dickerson guy came from Texas A&M. So, yeah, they were obviously paying those guys. I mean, you know, they did the 30 for 30 on it. And, yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, but, that 30 for 30 was outstanding. Pony XS. Yeah, about 15 years old now. It's aged very well.
Yeah, I did. And I still, to this day, Dickerson will not say what he got or where he got it from. But you know, he's made light of it though, and the fact that now we have it's legal. You know, now with NIL, you pay for it. So it's kind of ironic, actually.
It's absolutely ironic, and lo and behold, here we go. Right, we got that nice Texas money has come back through again, and build a nice program there. I know you're a Heisman voter, and
yeah.
So how do you prepare to cast your vote? How much legwork goes in? How much watching goes into it? Because you just mentioned you got 4 high school football games, big time playoff games tonight that you're or this week that you're covering all on Thursday. How do you find the time to dig in to some of these Heisman candidates?
Well, what I do, I'll tell you the truth. I usually don't start paying real close attention until later in the season. I mean, I've always seen those lists and odds going in of Heisman favorites, but I mean, experience has told me that doesn't mean anything because you never know what can happen. I mean, a guy can get hurt or a team's really bad. You just don't know. So about, maybe unless obviously someone has a great game like an Ashton Genty, um, then you notice. But I kind of really pay attention, and I like to wait. The deadline to vote is actually the Monday after the conference championship game, and I tend to wait until at least that Sunday because I like to see. A lot of times it's come down to who I think performs best in the championship game.
So is that when you waited this year till then?
Yeah, although I can't say publicly who I voted for because that's a violation. And if I do say it, then they can actually kick me out. But I will say this, that I had a pretty good idea before that.
Okay.
Towards the end of the year, I had a pretty good idea. And nothing that happened on those championship games changed my mind.
It really speaks to you and your career as a journalist, the fact that you're involved in the Heisman Trophy and you have a vote. What was one of the more difficult decisions you can remember having to make?
Yeah, I can tell you exactly. My first vote was Charles Woodson and Peyton Manning. I mean, just look at those two guys. They're Hall of Famers in the NFL. Tremendous careers in college. And I actually voted for Charles Woodson, who won the award. It was tough, though. I mean, gosh, Peyton Manning. That was probably the most difficult of all of it.
Is there a reward you get from being a voter? Like, and I'm talking about, right, like internally, like something like, I would imagine there's some fulfillment there.
Yeah, there is. I mean, especially, if your guy wins and you feel good about it, there's no compensation per se. Usually what in the past they've sent like T-shirts, or they sometimes what they'll do is they'll give you a voucher for donor's choice, which goes to schools around the nation. You just go on the website, and then they give you a $25 or $50 voucher, and you can give that money to any school you choose, which I think is kind of neat.
That is cool.
I like. Yeah, so like I've given like to schools around usually in my area that I cover that have a need for a teacher will ask for something. But yeah, it feels good when you pick the winner. Although I mean, even sometimes, and I can't think of really any examples offhand, but even when you don't pick the winner, it's okay because you realize. I mean, like. You look at this year, for instance, and you've got Travis Hunter of Colorado and Genty from Boise State. And then, of course, a lot of people will point to Dylan Gabriel from Oregon. They're number one. They're seeded number one going into the playoffs. There's a lot of good candidates. So, and you always wonder, too, like, I'm wondering about Travis Hunter because, I mean, let's face it, Deion Sanders is pretty polarizing. And I don't know if people that don't like Deion, would maybe not vote for Travis Hunter because of that. I hope not. I hope they can overlook that. But, let's face it, we're human beings and bias is going to figure into this.
Yeah, we are. I think we may have seen some of that with the voting for Colorado as a team this year. I felt like earlier in the year they probably should have been ranked a little higher than at certain times where they were, but it all comes out in the wash the right way. What's at least in my opinion, what is the most creative Heisman campaign you've ever received?
Wow.
There's even if there was one, I'm sure there were guys who probably weren't even in your top three, but the PR campaign might be a number one.
Yeah, and that's interesting because this year the only thing I got was from a DVD from Boise State on Ashton Genty. Um, I, I don't know if it's because the paper I work for is not that big, but I've gotten some, but not a lot of promotional material. Um, I'm sure the bigger papers get all that stuff, but I don't know. Maybe they just target a specific audience or whatever.
We got to let
But
them know about the Victoria Advocate. I don't know
yeah,
what's going on.
yeah. Well, that's okay. I mean, it's nice to get that stuff, but I'm not going to let it affect my vote because you got to pick who you think is the best player
Was
or
there?
the.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, or maybe not, maybe not. And when you say the best player, um, it doesn't always mean the guy that's going to be the best pro player. This is an award based on his performance. I mean, some of the Heisman winners have really never done that much in pros. Give you an example from UCLA, Gary Diva. I mean, he never did anything in the pros really. So, but if he was the best player that year, then that's the person who should get the award.
Was there ever any real difficult decision you had to make in a sense where you voted for a guy and you thought to yourself, well, I'm an outlier here. Like, I don't think he's got any chance, but I'm still gonna vote for him. I feel very right about this.
Usually not my first vote, but sometimes like my third. You vote for three people. You vote for first, second, and third, and even this year, without saying who, the third person I voted for is not among the finalists. So he was kind of an outlier.
Was it? I don't want you to say it, but maybe it was Cam Scadaboo. I thought that was unfortunate that he wasn't. He's not going to
Yeah,
New York.
it wasn't Scatterboot, but
Okay.
look what happened. I think he's just all of a sudden caught people's eyes. Lately. I mean, obviously with his performance in the Big 12 championship game,
Yeah.
that obviously opened some eyes. But no, I'll tell you the most difficult one, and to this day I think maybe I got it wrong, was when it was Reggie Bush and Vince Young, and I voted for Reggie Bush, and I kind of regret that. I think maybe I should have voted for Vince Young.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, Reggie Bush was a great player. And even before, all that came out about, them buying his parents a house or whatever, but I mean, Vince Young, I mean, they beat him in the championship game. So, he has a pretty good case.
Yeah, he sure does, and it's interesting. That leads me to my next question. When you see a player like Vince Young just execute and perform under the utmost of pressure, right, with ice water in his veins, that's got to be a moment where you're like, "Geez, he maybe deserves this."
Yeah, there's no doubt what you said. That's why I like to wait till the end because although now it's changed a little bit where the conference championships don't mean as much as they used to. But that's why I always used to like to wait because I like to see how those players performed in the big games. And that to me, that we've taken the same approach in high school when we pick our MVP of our team after the year because we usually go with a guy from a team that has had a lot of success, unless, like for instance, like a Jonathan Brooks who played at UT. He was at Hallettsville, and he was our MVP, even though Shiner won the state championship and Hallettsville lost in the championship game. But sometimes you have an athlete like a Jonathan Brooks that just stands out so much that it's obvious.
All right, last question for you. How did you become a Heisman voter?
Yeah, that's a funny story because back in the day
you?
So he called me and said, "Hey man, we have an opening. Would you like to be a Heisman voter?" And I said, "Well, what are the requirements?" He said, "Well, you just have to vote." And well, I could do that. You know, that's how it started. And I've done it ever since. And hopefully I'll do it until I retire, which, I keep saying every year, this might be the year, but who knows?
It's funny. You met once they ask you if you want to vote, you've already met the requirements, right? Like you met Kim, you checked out. So that's it. You've met the requirements. Then all you really have to do is vote. He's not asking anybody, right, if they want to vote.
No, in fact, I think the chairman is Robert Cessna from the Bryan College Station Eagle and the sport there. So I think Cease is now because Kim is no longer working at the Waco paper, but I think he's in charge, and so he would be the one now if there was a vacancy, say, to reach out to someone.
I lied. I got one more for you. As a sports writer, because that's a profession that I think has almost been lost in the shuffle, is just how important you are. Like, especially guys who maybe will dig a little extra on some stories and really report what's going on in towns maybe where we don't know what's happening. How much does it mean to you that sports writers still get to decide, big honors like this, or at least have a huge hand in it? That's pretty cool still.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is actually, other than the sports writers where we pick a high school all-state team, this is really the only thing I do. It's neat. I mean, I think it's important, though, that, if you're going to do it, you need to do the research. And you try to stay away from biases. I mean, obviously, like, for instance, my son went to OU. So, like, when, Baker Mayfield or something is up there, he's probably wanting me to vote for Baker Mayfield. And he deserved it. But, or Kyler Murray. But you really do have to be careful and make sure you say, is this the guy that deserves it? And not just because, I went to school there or someone went to school there or I like that team kind of thing. But it's neat. And I hope, like other writers that like vote on the Hall of Fame and things like that, although that's much more exclusive. And to tell you the truth, I know now there are quite a few voters for the Heisman, and I know like the public votes, and I think that counts like 5% or something. But there's still a pretty big pool. There's former Heisman winners, there's writers. I think there's I don't know if coaches can vote or not, but it's a pretty big pool of people that are voting.
Well, it's a pretty big deal, and I respect your work, and I wanted to get a chance to chat with you about this, especially this time of year. So I can't thank you enough, Mike. I know how busy you are, so thank you so much for sharing some time today.
Okay, I appreciate it, Pete. Take care.
All right, there you go, Mike Foreman, Heisman voter with the Victoria Advocate during the day, and you can catch us after this break. We'll step aside. The Pete Souza Show, powered by the Rogue Media Network. Let me start.
It's the Pete Souza Show. Sports.